I had a client that I saw every week for 3 years, same time, same chair, same room. At the end of those 3 years, he was still struggling with the same things, the same fear, the same patterns, the same story. It was like we're going in circles. Now, I'm good at my job. I want to be clear about that. And I wasn't failing because I was incompetent. I was failing because I was using the wrong tool. At some point, I started asking the question that we're not supposed to ask as therapists. Is this model actually working for men, or are we just validating them? And that question cost me my career, but it was the best thing that ever happened to the men that I work with. In this episode, I'm going to tell you exactly why I left psychotherapy and what I found that's wrong with the traditional one-on-one model, specifically for men, and why the thing that changed everything wasn't a better version of what I was already doing. It was something completely different, something most men would never walk into voluntarily, and something that most therapists would never recommend. Stick with me. So I want to start this story talking about the way that our industry frames men and why we're pretty behind. So if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I've talked about this, but I think it's really worth repeating, is that the psychotherapy industry as a whole is about, I want to say 20, 30 years behind where men are. They still see men as bullies, as, violent offenders, as uncontrolled drug addicts, as angry people, as these kind of like Trumpian caricatures. And when I go to conferences, when I talk with my colleagues, it keeps coming back to that same thing. It really anchors on this idea that, the things that men need is to control themselves, right? They need to control their sexuality, and they need to control their anger. They need to get their substance use under control, right? It's all about, adding more of this kind of like, decorum, I think, to men. And it's the idea that we're just these savage creatures. And I think that's just not true. What I've seen in the work that I've been doing for, almost 15 years at this point is that the man, especially the modern man, and we're talking millennials, Gen Xers, certainly Gen Z, it's the nice guy. Most men that I see are not these asshole bullies. They're more muted. They're more quiet. I would even go as far as to say many of them feel castrated or weak. They feel like they're imposters. They feel like they don't belong in the world. They don't know what to do. They're confused. They don't know how to advance in their career. They don't know how to take a risk. They don't know how to build discipline. They don't know how to talk to a partner, how to go on a date. They're really, really lost. And what I see from a lot of guys is that they've kind of given up. They've looked at the system that we've built. They've looked at capitalism. They've looked at our government. They've looked at, the ability to own a home or to acquire wealth, or even to get in shape. And they're saying, I can't do it. It's impossible. Not me. Maybe someone on Instagram, maybe someone on social media, maybe my friend, but not me. And I see a lot of guys that have given up before they've even started. And that's really concerning to me. I want men to be themselves. I want us to grow. Our country, our world needs strong men. And I see so many guys checking out before they've even started. And I have to say humbly that I think a lot of psychotherapy is pushing that message. It's trying to make men more into women. It's trying to feminize them by having them sit in their feelings rather than deal with them. It's having us get validated and reinforcing a victim mentality that I see a lot. And it's really not pushing men to be a better version of what they are. So let me back it up a little bit and talk about some of my clinical training. When I was trained to be a psychotherapist, the number one thing that we were taught is that the relationship is what matters. And that safety, building safety and rapport with your client is how you get change. I just don't see that as true. I think men in general, we're less relational, right? We're much more objective based. So when you focus only on the relation and the connection, while that feels good, it feels nice, it doesn't really push a guy to overcome challenges in his life and ultimately become the best version of himself. This whole idea of creating safety, I think, is not as relevant. I think as a man, especially as a white man in America, we are the safest group. I'm not saying that our lives are easy, certainly not, but we're pretty damn safe. We're not really worried about danger in the same way that many other groups and certainly women are, So by focusing on being safe, by focusing on, validating, by focusing on just kind of what the traditional stereotype is of like just nodding and saying yes, creating that healing environment. It makes a lot of guys feel like they're not doing anything in therapy, right? And to some extent, that's true. We're being told that we have to discover it all on our own, and we have to move at our own pace, that the truth will come to us. But for many men, especially very traditionally masculine men, we were not taught introspection, literally, right? We weren't taught emotional intelligence. So to just be like, okay, you figure it out, one, makes the guy think, okay, well, really, what am I paying for? And two, it's too challenging in many ways, right? There's no guideline, there's no framework, there's no rules, there's no guidance. So what is the therapist doing? And when I told that story in the beginning, early in my career, I was that therapist. I went to a Buddhist university, which was, good in a lot of ways. But when you think about Buddhism, this idea of just being open and spacious and non-judgmental, it's a good foundation. But I found a lot of the guys I worked with ended up getting stuck because I wasn't being active enough. I wasn't sharing what I know, which is crazy, right? Like I went to school for, I did my undergrad in neuroscience, for God's sakes, right? I went to, 3 years of a master's program, additional 3 years of psychoanalytic training. And I just wasn't talking about that. I wasn't sharing what I learned. I wasn't sharing what I knew. I wasn't offering insights that I gained, not just through education, but through experience, right? Through working with clients, through my own journey as a man. I was holding so much back from my clients because I was trying to be a good psychotherapist. In reality, I was just failing them. I was using the wrong tool. I was taught that if I just gave enough space, that healing would arise, healing would happen. And maybe that's true in some extent, but I think most guys, when they come to psychotherapy, when they come to the work, they need mentorship, they need guidance, and they need camaraderie. And the most important thing that they need, which is what my industry does not teach at all, the most important thing is they need respect. They need to be respected, and they need to respect the provider. And if I'm not sharing anything about my own life, if I'm not opening up, if I'm not being vulnerable and authentic with them, if I'm not showing that I know what they're talking about, right? That I have some education, that I have some experience, I'm not a respectable person. I'm just like a weird robot with a clipboard. And that just pushes a lot of guys away, understandably, right? It's like, why would you want to talk to a mirror when you're looking for an expert, when you're looking for some help? So when I started to pivot, when I started to bring in a little bit more of that coaching mentality, when I started to be more open and honest myself, when I started to own my biases, when I started to be more honest with my clients about what I thought, magic started happening. And that is so critical for guys, because what we need is we need a confidant, we need a comrade, we need somebody who's going to be our brother in arms through the emotional ups and downs. I've been beating this drum for a while, but the physical demands of men are less and less. I'm not saying you don't have to work out. You definitely have to work out. You definitely have to be healthy, but the demands of the modern man are more emotional. They're more mental. They're even more spiritual. They're completely different than what we were built and bred and evolved to do. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but it means that we need different tools and different strategies to overcome modern life's challenges. And therapy and coaching is certainly one of them. So the next evolution that I want to talk about, and this is something that we really do well at MTO, is we go from individual work to group work. And this is something that other therapists won't tell you because they're operating from a scarcity mindset. So listen up. For most guys, right, most average users, they get diminishing returns from individual work after about 2, maybe 3 years. Now, that might seem like a long time if you're new to psychotherapy, right? If you've never thought about this, if you're brand new, you'd be like, 2 or 3 years, that's crazy. But, think about working out. If you've never worked out before and you go to the gym, after 2 or 3 years, you're just going to be able to start seeing results, right? Like you're going to beat some of those, unhealthy conditions and become fit. And now you can really grow. In psychotherapy, for most guys, you're pretty much done after that. You've done what I like to call the autobiographical work. You've talked about your life, your childhood. You've unpacked your family trauma, your conditioning. You've hopefully resolved your presenting issue. If you've come in, trying to reduce your drinking or recovering from a divorce or trying to date, working with a sexual issue, that has hopefully been resolved in those, 2 or 3 years. And then it becomes a lot more introspective. And I think a lot of therapists won't tell you this because obviously they want to keep the caseload, right? They're coming from a scarcity mentality. They want to keep you in their ecosystem because it's a consistent paycheck. Look, I get it. I'm a business owner. That being said, it is not of service to the client. So what I think is next, and what I think is really the pinnacle of treatment and what becomes the long-term option for a lot of guys, is a men's group. Men's groups are incredible and they're advanced. Again, our industry has it backwards. A lot of our industry says that groups are, the more economic model, or the cheaper model, or the budget model, right? They really diminish the power of group by saying that, if you can't afford individual, then you can get into group. And it can't be further from the truth. In many ways, group is the pinnacle of treatment. It is the next level. And the fact that it's cheaper is great, because you've done a lot of the work, you've invested the money up front, and it's less about triage at that point and more about maintenance. So why is group incredible? A couple of reasons. First thing, group is way more closer to real life, right, than individual. Even though I talked all about being more honest and open and authentic, which is true, I'm still working, right? As your therapist, I'm still doing my job, there is a level of artificial connection there. There's no way around it, right? You're still paying to talk to me, just be honest about that. But in group, yes, there's me or one of my other providers are facilitating the group, there's still oversight, but the members are people just like you. So it's way closer to real life, which means things that don't really come up in individual come up in group. Specifically, stuff like conflict, right? Judgment. You might not like the way someone said something. You might have a different belief from somebody else. You might disagree with the way they're going about their life or decision that they made. Maybe you feel like they insulted you or they talked over you. There's all this beautiful ground for conflict, which is actually how you grow as a man, right? It's by overcoming challenges and overcoming conflict. Also, you get to learn more about other people and you get to feel less alone. We've talked ad nauseum about the male loneliness epidemic, and men's group is a direct antidote to that. You're getting connected with other guys talking about real shit. I don't know how you can be more direct than that. So you're actually building real relationships. And what we do differently at MTO, because again, we're breaking free from that psychotherapy model and the limitations, is you can actually be friends with these people, right? In a traditional therapy group, you're not allowed to contact them. Everything is very siloed, which again, makes more loneliness. From us, we do hiking trips. We're doing a camping trip coming up here. We are wanting to build real male connections because that is what the world needs. And that is what the modern male needs. They need guys that are in their corner that they can talk about the real shit with and go through life together with. That is what is lacking. So group gives you that. Group also brings out other parts of your personality. So as an individual, you can just talk about how you are with other people. Maybe you feel shy and shut down. Maybe you feel like you overpower people. Maybe you have trouble making friends. If I'm sitting with you individually, all we can do is work in the margins outside of the room. But in group, I can work with you in real time, in vivo, right? If you have trouble vocalizing and asserting yourself, great. Here's 5 other guys that you can practice that with in real time with your therapist there to coach you every step of the way. You get an actual battleground, an actual dojo, an actual practice gym to be able to build some of these skills. And then lastly, as you start to grow, I think a lot of men want to mentor. That's the way that we show our love, is by teaching, by guiding, by being a role model. So as you start to mature through the group and new people come in, you get to be that leader and you get to be that mentor. And that feels really good to a lot of guys. And most importantly, it feels like belonging, because you are actually part of something and you're having positive impact on somebody else who maybe was just like you a few years ago. You get that mirror effect. When you're seeing someone that's struggling with something that you're going through and you can help them, you're also helping yourself. And that is incredibly powerful. So I love the men's groups ideas. What it really does is it takes it out of the head and into reality. Where individual is really important, I think, especially when you're first starting out, because a lot of the breakthroughs that you may have, a lot of the emotional releases that you may have, that is much better done in individual work because you can get that one-on-one attention and you can go at your pace. But at some point, it's about moving into group. It's about moving into that next level of work. And it moves me, and my providers, instead of being, healers, we get to be guides. We get to be role models. We get to, be part of a group as well and facilitate and lead and build real connections that are so much stronger than like a weekly paid relationship. It's a real friendship. It's a real connection. And I think that is really critical and what so much guys need. So all I want to say, right, is that check us out. For one, check out Men's Therapy online. And also, if you're looking at doing, work either with us or with someone else, ask them some of these questions. Ask them what they think about the way the psychotherapy industry talks about men. Ask them what they learned in school about what it means to be a man. Ask them how they work with male emotions. If they don't have a good answer, they're probably not a good fit. What you're entrusting us with is your mind, right? It's your brain, it's your identity, it's your purpose. So do your work and, vet this out, right? Like vet people. And again, if you come to us, if you talk to me, check us out, menstherapy.online. We know what we're talking about. We're here to help you do that individual work and then graduate into group and then graduate into your life. And there are so many guys that have seen so many unbelievable changes, that have recovered from divorce, that have overcome nice guy tendencies, that have beaten addictions, that have gotten themselves in shape, that have done the things they thought were impossible, not because of me, right? And not because of my providers, because of the other guys in the group, because of the power of brotherhood and the power of accountability and the power of belonging. That's what we're offering you. So check us out, menstherapy.online.